This cannot be.
Welcome, ESO community, to my brand new werewolf character guide, or how to build a character for PvP specifically. Also, you can take some of these tips and also build a werewolf for PvE as well, but mainly strictly PvP. I'm going to go over the stats, or the most important stats for a werewolf, gear selection, or gear sets I recommend, race recommendations and class recommendations, and potions and champion points and everything in between and around that as well. Munda stones, poisons, stuff like that. But let's go ahead and get into it, shall we? Alright, one of the most important things for your werewolf is the base. Not the werewolf skills just yet, but your class base. What class do you like the most? What class benefits you the best when going over into werewolf form? The top class is obviously going to be a stamina sorcerer, or the sorcerer class, due to the fact that majority of the passives carry over into werewolf form, unlike other classes. You have Unholy Knowledge, reduces the health, magicka, and stamina cost of your abilities by 6%, which is a sustain passive, which will also carry over into werewolf. Any passive that requires you to select or to slot a ability on your bar in order to get the passive will not carry over into werewolf. Keep that in mind. Persistence is another passive that actually will carry over into werewolf. After blocking an attack, your next health, magicka, or stamina ability costs 15% less. So it's another sustain morph right on top of Holy Knowledge. So you stack those two together, that is 21% reduction. Another passive that's not really so much that important, but it's the reduction of your ultimate, so it allows you to get to werewolf a little bit quicker, which is known as Power Stone. Reduce the cost of your ultimate abilities by 15%, so any armor set that you wear that has ult reduction or good ult regeneration, you can get your werewolf a little bit faster compared to other classes. We also got another one here, which also increases your mag recovery by 10%, which will allow you to sustain your mag pool a little bit easier due to the fact of the werewolf's high cost abilities, especially that magicka heal. Energized. This is a damage morph. Increases, or not morph, damage passive. Increases your physical and shock damage by 5%. And amplitude as well. So the more health they have, the more damage you'll do to them. So three of the four passives right here carry over to werewolf form. And two passives carry over here. And then you just have one passive that just reduces ult cost. Not just your class that matters, but your race as well. But if you don't want to play a sorcerer, my list would be a Stam Sorc, Stamina Templar, Stam Necro, Stamina Nightblade, then a Warden, and the last one, Dragonite. Recommended races that I actually would prefer you guys to use would be an Orc or an Imperial. Orc gives you health back when you deal damage. 2,000 health, so that'd be about 1,000 health in PvP because everything would get cut in half. However you want to call it, or however you want to say it. And then also you get weapon damage, reduce the cost of spread by 12%, so when you're chasing a target or chasing another player or an enemy of any sort, it'd be easier to chase after them, plus you got 10% movement speed. And then increases your max stamina by 1,000. Another race I recommend would be an Imperial, which would give you 2,000 health, 2,000 stamina, and then 6% cost reduction for all abilities, which would be nice in a werewolf. It would give you greater sustain. So Imperial and Orc are my top two choices. After that, it would be Dark Elf, Khajiit, Nord, and just down the line. What else actually in the top four in my opinion, but... And Argonian as well. Argonian gives some pretty good passes, disease and poison resistance, but Imperial and Orc is my top choice for races. Another thing that I want to mention is Werewolf does the best with full heavy armor, or at least 5 pieces of heavy, 1 light, 1 medium, or you can go all 7 heavy. The reason is that Werewolf just benefits more from heavy armor than it does medium, at least in PvP zones, because you have rapid mending, which gives you healing for every piece you wear of heavy armor. Also, heavy armor grants you more stamina return when you do heavy attacks, which would synergize with the Werewolf Pursuit passive. Juggernaut gives you more max health per heavy armor pieces you wear. Constitution is really nice because when you get attacked, you recover resources a little bit, depending on how many pieces of heavy you have, and then Resolve gives you more resistance. Granted, yes, there is heavy armor penalties, but they're very easy to negate. Not a problem. Reduces damage taken from martial attacks, increase the amount of damage blocked by 1%, increases damage done with bash, and then reduce your damage taken while being in crowd control. And then medium armor is more for PvE based, for higher damage builds. But like I said, you can use medium in PvP as well, it's just not recommended. Unless you have a lot of damage and you can get away with killing the guy before he can turn and destroy you. For you're outside your werewolf form, for your normal base form, I recommend one-handed shield or dual wield. My favorite ability for any one-handed shield werewolf type build is Heroic Slash because it gives me minor heroism and it allows me to get ultimate a little bit faster. Granted, if I play a class like a Warden or any other classes that give me heroism a different way, I won't use Heroic Slash. Dual wield is really nice because you can use 2 weapons at once and 2 different types of enchants. So you can run a shock glyph and you can run a regular weapon damage glyph if you like. But that's pretty much it on the base form. Let me go over the Werewolf Morphs. So, the most effective type of Werewolf Morph we have in the game, or the least most favored in PvP, would be the Pack Leader. And then you have the Berserker, which is a damage dealer, which does more bleed pressure than the Pack Leader. But the unmorphed version you have is a typical brown werewolf. It doesn't give anything crazy, just increased max stamina, no bleeds, no increased timer, no mitigation. In Cyrodiil, if you're running solo, I recommend playing Pack Leader more often, due to the fact that your dire wolves will proc call of the pack, which will allow you to stay in werewolf longer than than normal. And also it gives you minor courage, which will buff up your weapon damage a little further. It gives you 215 weapon damage. However, a pack of pack leaders on top of you with the dire wolves constantly snaring your enemies, y'all can be a huge threat, especially when you snare them and they can't get away from you. Werewolf Berserker is a little bit different. It does a heavy attack, cone splash, and also does bleeds. So when you heavy attack, you can hit like a bunch of people in front of you, but if you heavy attack on a pack leader, you only can hit one person in front of you because they removed the splash heavy attack from the pack leader patches ago. Berserker is better in a group, especially if you have a healer or another werewolf with you to keep your timer up. But if you want to, go ahead and run it solo, but it's just going to apply a bleed tick. That's going to tick for bleed damage for 4 seconds, and your heavy attack still 50% splash damage, which is not bad, especially if you can start scaling it properly. But for PvP, I recommend the pack leader for solo play. Just because they increase timer and they increase mitigation, you take 10% less damage. That's why. For your pounce, Brutal Pounce is probably the better morph of the two in my opinion, due to the fact that you can stack a bleed and you will start getting weapon damage. And your weapon damage will start to stack. So the more times you proc your pounce, the more times you'll increase your weapon damage. It starts to scale higher and higher. Feral Pounce just going to give you increased timer. That's all it's going to do, and a little bit of stamina back when you land. And that stamina is not noticeable. That's only 100 stamina points. That's nothing. So for all recommendations, go Brutal Pounce if you play pack leader. But however, Feral Pounce would be nice on a Berserker because you can extend the timer a little bit more. Probably even 1 second. That 1 second can cause you to maintain your werewolf form a little bit better. But like I said, Pounce puts a bleed tick on people, and it basically can execute them as well if they're at lower health. So, and it gives you weapon damage if you use the Brutal Pounce morph, Brutal Carnage effect. Now for the burst heals, Hercin's Bounty. And the morphs are Hercin's Rage and Hercin's Fortitude. They both cost magicka, so when I recommend the races earlier, like Orc or Imperial will be better in sustain. It'll be closer to 5,100 than the Orc, which is 5,335. Hercin's Rage. This morph is only really good in PvE type content. If you cast at full health, gain Major Berserk for a short duration after casting, but also increase your damage taken. So when you practice at full health, you'll get Major Berserk, which I think is 10% more damage now. It used to be 25%, they nerfed it down, but honestly, that 10% is not that noticeable in my opinion, and you're not guaranteed to get it if you're not at full health. So, and plus you take more damage. But like I said, it's better in a PvE zone, especially when you're doing a damage test or DPS test on a test dummy, or you're trying to hit those higher numbers in PvE. Not that recommended, but if you're at full health, you do gain 3,000 stamina back. While slotted, you gain Major Brutality, increase your weapon damage by 20%. And that goes for both morphs. Hercin's Fortitude. It increases your healing done by a lot more, and it also gives you health and stamina recovery. In PvP, that 333 is going to be cut in half, so it's only 100 something. Not a whole lot, but still better than the other morph, in my opinion. And when you're at full health, you restore 3,000 stamina. I already said that. But this ability scales up a max HP. So the more health you have, the stronger it will be. But the higher weapon critical you have, the more chance that this heal will crit, even though it's a magicka base heal. They changed it. It used to be spell critical. Now it's weapon critical. For the fear morphs are the roars. Rousing roar morphs. Ferocious roar. So this one's actually quite interesting. When you fear a target, your heavy attacks will be faster, but you will not receive major fracture or breach, whatever you want to call it. But you will fear up to six nearby enemies, fear them 4 seconds, and set them off balance for 7 seconds. And your heavy attacks also are 33% faster for 7 seconds after casting. You also gain major savagery, increasing your weapon critical, so you will have a higher weapon critical chance. But for this morph, I recommend, if you want to use this more effectively, you can run an Oblivion Night Slayer type build, or you can chamber your Howl of Agony, heavy attack Howl of Agony combos a lot faster after fearing them. But for a majority of my werewolf builds, I don't really like using this one. I prefer to use Deafening Roar. Applies major breach and minor maim to enemies, reducing their resistances and damage done. So basically what it does, it fractures the target and it's a type of penetration. You basically ignore some of their resistance. And you put maim, which basically reduces the damage done back to you. For most scenarios, I recommend this morph. Due to the fact that penetration is a lot lower, you don't get much from your champion points anymore due to the CP changes. But overall, this is the morph that I recommend. Now the piercing Helmorphs. Howl of Despair and Howl of Agony. Howl of Despair grants an Empower or a Synergy or a Feeding Frenzy synergy to your nearby enemies. And when your teammates activate it, the Feeding Frenzy synergy, which grants them Empower for 5 seconds, increases their damage done with light and heavy attacks by 40%. Not bad, especially if you run it in groups. So at least one werewolf should run this, in my opinion. Enemies who are facing you take 10% more damage from this attack as well. So as long as they're looking at you, you'll hit them with 10% more damage. So you don't have to rely on the fear combo as much. But, yeah. Howl of Agony is your basic damage dealing morph. This is the typical one that I use most of the time against feared targets. So I'll fear them and hit them with a heavy howl combo for the most damage, but if I can't land that heavy, I usually try to hit them with that howl before they dodge roll it. Most of the time they usually dodge it, but sometimes they don't. But for most builds in PvP, Howl of Agony, especially if you're solo. Infectious Claws morphs. This is your disease damage and damage over time morphs. We have Claws of Anguish. Claws of Anguish applies Major Defile and Minor Defile. And for most situations, you would want to use this morph over Claws of Life, especially if you're solo, because you want to be able to kill your enemy before, they can just heal right back up. Claws of Life. This one is better for outnumbered situations, especially you can hit a bunch of people with it and you'll get a lot more heals back, because how much damage you do to your target is how much you'll receive back. And you are healed for 100% of the damage over time cost. So it's actually a pretty strong heal if you can stack it just right, or it hits just right. But also keep in mind, you gotta also have a lot of damage as well. Claws of Life also applies Minor Defile, which isn't too strong, but it can be helpful. But for most situations, like I said, Claws of Anguish would be the better morph. And basically, you want to get every single one of these passives, but when you play a werewolf, you're going to get your movement speed increased by 30%. So you're basically, your walk speed and your sprint speed are going to be increased. And also, increases the stamina, your heavy attacks restored by 50%. So like I mentioned, you can stack that with the heavy passive, or the heavy attack passive from your heavy armor. Blood Rage allows you to stay in form longer as long as you're doing damage, which is pretty cool. So when you deal damage, the duration of your werewolf transformation is increased by 4 seconds. This effect can occur once every 5 seconds. Savage Strength increases your weapon damage by 18%, and it grants you major resolve, increasing your physical and spell resistance by 5,948. So builds that use my Chuden, the old werewolf builds, it would not work anymore. It would just be negated by this buff, because you're basically getting the buff already. They removed the base 10,000 resistance werewolf used to get, and they used to be able to stack it with Chuden. You can't do it anymore. They removed it. So werewolves are a little bit squishier nowadays, but still manageable. Blood Moon allows you to infect another player with Lycanthropy once every 7 days by returning to the werewolf ritual sites, which is basically Bankarai, Reaper's March, and the Rift. They all three have werewolf shrines, or you can just buy it from the Crown store and become a werewolf that way. Call of the Pack allows you to stay in form longer, so as long as you have 4 other werewolves, or 3 other werewolves in your group, or 4 werewolves in one group total, or 2 pack leaders, or a pack leader and 1 berserker, it's going to go up to a maximum of 80%. So your 2 direwolves will make it 60%, I believe. Yeah, 60% out of 80%, so that's why it's a lot better than the berserker, which doesn't proc any of these passes unless you're in a group with another werewolf, so that's transformed. So that's pretty much it on the werewolf skills and morphs and passives. But let me go ahead and go over the recommended sets and the most important stats as a werewolf, and the champion points as well, and Mundus stones. Alright, so for gear recommendations, you have Eternal Vigor. Eternal Vigor is one of the most powerful sets in the game due to the fact that it gives you recoveries in stamina, magicka, and health. And not just that, it gives you a crap ton of it. Now for other recommended sets, it can be practically anything that increases your stamina, gives you weapon damage, penetration. But you usually want to go for a stamina set combined with a tanky set for most situations. Or you can run multiple sustain sets together. Or full damage, whatever you prefer. Eternal Vigor is definitely in my top number 1 or 2 or 3 spots, especially in my top 5. As your base, probably typically more as a base set, so more in your body than your weapons and jewelry. Another set I'll recommend, which is a newer set known as Deadlands Assassins, gives you weapon damage, increases your max stamina, and then gives you 200 weapon damage, and then dealing damage and then within 10 meters of you with a heavy attack causes you to throw a cone of knives, dealing 4,652 physical damage to enemies hit. And if an enemy is hit, or if enemy hit has 50% health or less, they also bleed for or they also take an additional bleed damage over 13 seconds, which is not bad. Another set that I recommend is Hulking Draugr. Gives you a lot of max stamina, a lot. So it allows you to kind of spam your house more. It also does damage and roll dodge more, block more. Just overall better stamina sustain. Because like I said, you can spam roll dodge, attacks, whatever it may be. Another recommended set would be the Armor of Truth. It gives you weapon critical, max stamina, weapon damage, and when you deal damage to an enemy is off balance, which typically you get that by fearing a target, your weapon damage is increased by 4 to 60 for 10 seconds, so it's another good set to use as well. Impregnable. This basically just gives you health, stamina, magicka, and then crit resistance, due to the fact that crit resistance is a lot lower this patch. But yeah, you get what I mean. Desert Rose gives you armor, max health, max magicka, and when you take damage, you have a 25% chance to restore 2,000 magicka, and this effect can occur once every 4 seconds. A really good sustained mag set. You can use this if you're solo, when you're taking a lot of pressure. This will allow you to kind of sustain your mag pool pretty effectively, to an extent, until you get really overswarmed, and it's not that effective. Plague Doctor just gives you straight up max health, and this will make you a little bit tankier and heal more. Prisoner's Rags. So when you sprint, you start to gain magicka back. So as long as you're sprinting, you're going to start gaining mag back every 1 second. 1,000 magicka. So think about it. You're taking pressure. As long as you're not staring to the ground, you can literally just sprint away and get all your mag back. So it's not a bad set to use. Central Defender. So all you got to do, like I said, this gives you stamina, health, magicka, dealing direct damage with non-heavy attacks. So all you got to do is stack this up to 10 times. If you do a heavy attack, you get about 7,000 resources in all 3 pools. Well, not all 3 pools, just stamina and magicka. I'm bad. Spriggans, max stamina, weapon damage, and almost 3,000 something penetration, which is really nice. Salvation, max stamina recovery, max damage, which is the cost of your werewolf transformation by 33%. While in werewolf form, your weapon damage is about 150. Another really good set that I like to use, like I talked about a lot. Reduce your ult transformation, especially you stack with that with an Imperial and a Sorcerer. Your ults can be pretty cheap, especially the new Shapeshifter chain. It'll be further than that. Essence of Thief, or sort of Essence Thief, my bad. Max stamina, weapon damage, and dealing damage with light or heavy attack. Draws essence from the enemy that pulls near them for 5 seconds. During the pool heals you for 4,000 health, restores 4,000 stamina, and increases your damage done by 10%, which is not bad. So basically, you'll throw this little thing on the ground, you gotta go pick it up, and your werewolf literally turn green. Sword of the Ranger. Gives you stam recovery, weapon critical, max stam recovery, and reduce the effectiveness of snares applied to you by 50%. You definitely do not want to be snared to the ground. Werewolves, one of the biggest weaknesses is snare, especially when you're trying to run away or kite. You'll usually get grabbed by a bunch of immobilizations and a bunch of ice wardens. Yeah, so make sure if you ever have a problem with that, you can always put this on. Titanborn. Penetration, weapon damage, max stamina, adds 110 weapon damage, and then 1240 physical penetration. While in combat, it doubles, and then when you're under 75% while in combat, this bonus quadruples to 400 for weapon damage, and 4,960 physical penetration when you're under 50% health. Really good set. I really recommend it if you want to use that type of set. It's really nice damage, good pen. Fury. You take damage, you start to begin to stack weapon damage, and gives you health and stamina as the other pieces, and weapon damage. So it's pretty good to use. I recommend it if you want to. Blood Moon. All you got to do is just basically proc 5 consecutive light attacks, and you will stack the Blood Scent, which basically will increase your light attack speed and light attack damage by 55%, and increase your light attack speed by 50%. And then we have Savage Werewolf. Savage Werewolf will basically increase your, not really increase, but gives you max stamina, weapon damage, stamina recovery, and then your light and heavy attacks rend flesh, causing your enemies to bleed. So you can stack this with a Berserker build and have a little bit heavier bleeds, but it also just goes off your weapon damage. Or spell damage. A recommended weapon to use on your back bar for any werewolf build will be the Asylum Greatsword. When you deal damage with reverse slash, you generate up to 12 ultimate based on how much execute bonus damage it dealt. So, especially running around in PvP, you just want to get your whirl as fast as possible. So just find a group of ads or a lower health player and use it. A recommended mythic would be the Gaze of Sithis. Probably one of the best mythics right now for werewolf. Increase your max health, health recovery, and adds armor. Werewolves don't really typically block, so block mitigation is not that important. But as you all know, on a sword, you do block to get that one passive. But yeah, 3,000 health will increase your healing, health recovery will increase your sustain, and armor will make you a little bit tankier. Keep in mind with that. Some more recommended sets would probably be Stuns, weapon damage, offensive penetration, and then when you fear somebody or knock them off balance, you get more penetration. Shackle Breaker, another set I recommend for sustain. Stack that with Eternal Vigor, you get really nice sustain out of it. Hiss Whisperer. Dealing down to light or medium attack heals you for 300 health and 300 stamina and magicka, and then dealing damage with a fully charged heavy attack, it basically doubles. Heartland's Conqueror. Weapon damage, max magicka, and max stamina. Increased effectiveness of your weapon case by 100%. It's actually a pretty good set, I also recommend it. Gloomgrace. Gives you health, healing taken, health, and then when you take damage, you become a shadow for 10 seconds, and it heals you, and then it basically scales off your HP, and it gives you some AoE, or reduces area attacks by 20%, and it turns you into like a black shadowy wolf. Looks pretty cool. Lilith's Path is a full recovery set, basically magicka, stamina, and health recovery, and increase your health and magicka stamina recovery by 18%. It got nerfed a little bit to 25, but it's still pretty good. Pariah is another recommended set. Health, armor. So the lower your health to get the tankier you will be. This is really good for 1vxing or just staying alive a lot longer. Mechanical Acuity gives you max stamina, max mag, weapon damage, and when you deal damage you gain unhearing mechanical vision for 5 seconds, granting you 100% critical strikes. So how long you have this up, you will be pretty much, especially on like a G werewolf, your crits will hit really hard, so keep in mind on that. And then Clever Alchemist. Max health, weapon damage, and when you drink a potion during combat, you feel a rush of energy, increasing your weapon and spell damage by 675. So this is basically a controlled burst type thing. So you pop it whenever you feel like you need more damage, take somebody out. But I also recommend when you use this set, it's going to take a potion away. Or it's going to mess your sustain up sometimes, so be careful. Recommended monster sets: Bloodspawn, Stam Recovery, and when you take damage, you have a 6% chance to generate 13 ultimate, and you also lower resistance, so you can start getting ult back. Malubath, max health, and when you take damage, you have a 10% chance to create a beam. So it'll basically attach to the enemy, it'll start to heal you, and it'll give you increased healing received, H vitality, and then it also scales up your max HP. Molokina increases your weapon damage from light and heavy attacks. Not light and heavy, but basically just do a melee attack twice, and then it will trigger, and it will give you up to 560 weapon damage. But your abilities also cost 8% more. Eternal Vigor. When you use an ability, so as long as you permanent abilities, it start proccing more often, and it basically pops out of the Wimmer, and it starts giving you health and stamina and magicka back. But it will pick one out of the 3 every time. Troll King. Everything just, health recovery got nerfed, so Troll King's not as good as it used to be, but you can still stack it, I guess. But I recommend not to use it anymore, but if you want to, go right ahead. Zol, the Ever Wakeful. When you break free, you release a wave of energy, causing enemies within 8 meters of you to become fear for 3 seconds. You also gain 33 weapon and spell damage for each enemy hit. So basically when you break free, you fear a bunch of people around you, and you gain a little bit of weapon damage for it. Other mythics I recommend would be the Shapeshifter, reducing the cost of transformation ultimate abilities by 50%. While transformed, you only get these extra resources while being in werewolf form. You get health, stamina, and magicka by 1,707. Another recommended mythic would be the Torque of Constancy. While your stamina is less than 50%, increase your mag recovery by 450. While your magicka is less than 50%, increases your stamina recovery. So this is pretty good sustained. You can wear it on practically any werewolf build and have pretty decent sustain at the 50% point. Another item would be Malakath. You would just be increase your damage done by 16%, so all your crits will start hitting 50% less, but your base damage will be still being 16% more, so your white and your yellows will just be 16%, unless you have a little bit more crit damage, but it'll be nerfed by 50%, so keep that in mind. So that's pretty much it on gear selection, stuff like that, but I'm going to go ahead and show you what potions and food I usually recommend. Potions, honestly, you want the tech pots, try potions. Try potions will replenish your health, magicka, and stamina. Will also give you recoveries as well. You'll need these the most as a werewolf, in my opinion, because you're more of a hybrid build in PvP because you rely on health for stronger heals. You rely on magicka for more to spam your heals. And you rely on stamina and weapon damage and penetration to do damage. So you kind of need all three. So run tripods the most, and the tech pots against stealthy people. Food I recommend is Bewitched Sugar Skulls, packed with bone broth and typical RTM takeaway broth or typical tri-stat food. Packed bone broth reduces your ult cost by a little bit, but doesn't give you any max magicka. Sugar Skulls give you health recovery, a little more max resources than typical purple food. Or Dubious Cameron, but Dubious Cameron gives you less stamina and just stamina recovery. RTM takeaway broth is better in my opinion, so I recommend that if you want to run a drink. Or I think it's a food, I'm not sure. That's pretty much that. Poisons, it could be anything, it could be double dots, it can be whatever amount you want it to be. It could be the one that snares people, the one that messes their sustain up, it could be one that does pressure, that does defile, whatever. It's just up to you. I prefer double dots because it seems to push out the most damage, so yeah. Recommended traits on all your gear should probably be impenetrable due to the fact that crit resistance got took a big nerf, so I recommend going that route. Tremendous stones, warrior, tower, lover, health, lord, any of them except the spell damage one or anything that doesn't benefit werewolf at all. Steed, all of those would work. The warrior is my top right now because it gives you just straight up weapon damage. The most important stats is all three. Max stamina, max health, and max magicka. Weapon damage, physical, and spell, and critical resistance need to be high in werewolf form. So for example, you need at least almost 30k or at least above 29, 28. 26 will be fine if you can sustain it, but make sure you can get those up. The tankier you will be, the harder you'll be to kill. But make sure you have high recoveries, good weapon damage, whatever it may be. I usually put 64 into stamina, in my opinion, but you can mix it up how you want. You can put health, stamina, magicka, whatever you need the most for your type of build, or to be your werewolf build. Alright, so let's go ahead and get into the champion points. For the blue tree, I usually picked Enduring Resolve and Duelist Rebuff. I just want to reduce the damage taken as much as possible because people just hit hard. But honestly, if you're talking about offensive, Deadly Aim, Master at Arms, Physical Weapon Expert is also really good. Weapon Expert increases your damage on light and heavy attacks because Werewolf does a lot of these. You can also run that if you like. You can also run Critical Resistance to bump it up, but honestly, I'm not really using it because I don't feel like I need it. I recommend these two: Enduring Resolve, Duelist Rebuff, Middling Aim, and Mastered Arms is my recommendation. However, you can play around with anything you want in the blue tree. Whatever you think that you need, go ahead and try it out and see if it works for you. For red, I like the Bastion. Increases the effectiveness of your damage shields and damage against shield enemies. So you can use this to basically kill people that are using shields more often. So usually kill Max Orcs or shield stacking anybody. So it could be shield stacking Max Orcs and Mag Blades typically. Peace of Mind, Recovery, Ironclad, Vitality, or Boneless Vitality, increase your max health, which is a really good one, or even Ironclad, or Rejuvenation. I know a lot of these are being changed, so keep in mind for that as well. You need to get max health here, Hero's Vigor, Hasty, Sprinter. That's pretty much it on the red. There's not much more you can really benefit with. I know some people use Bloody Renewal and Siphoning Spells, but you don't really need to as a werewolf. But try it and see if you like it. For the green, it's just quite simple. Just run Liquid Efficiency, Warm Out, Gifted Rider, Steed's Blessing. Those are the ones I pretty much recommend. I think the one out of all of them for a werewolf build is Steed's Blessing. Increases your out of combat movement speed by 20% at maximum. But guys, that's pretty much it on how to build a werewolf character for PvP, and you can take some of this advice and put it over into PvE as well. But like I said, Stam Sorcerer or Sorcerer is the best class for werewolf in my opinion right now, just due to how many passives carry over right now as well. But remember, Stam Sorcerer, Templar, Necro, Nightblade, Warden, and Dragon Knight. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed that little guide. Peace.